Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending when and where you are seeing or hearing this episode. My name is Patrick Henz. Normally, I am a co-host of Data Driven Formula One, doing these episodes together with Ganna Pogrevna. But as we are not only in different countries, but also different continents, difficult to always meet. So sometimes we are doing also episodes alone, and this is one of them. Lately, somebody commented or reminded us that Formula One not started in 1950, but already years before. And of course, he had a very valid points. When you are scrolling down on YouTube, for example, you see we started 1950 because the first Formula One season started in 1950, but the first Formula One race, meaning a race based on Formula One regulations, we already saw in 1946. So we have various years using the Formula One regulations before we had our first championship. So I think after we're doing this podcast for some years now, maybe a good time to go back and also analyze these very first years before we had the first championship. Interesting history, and that's today's topic. I hope you like it. To align it a little bit with history, we are quite close after the end of World War II. Officially, it's started September 1st, 1939, and ended September 2, 1945. This, as World War II includes, of course, Europe, but also the conflict with Japan. And due to this, the official end is September 2. If we just focus on Europe for a moment, here, World War II, the activities, the fighting ended with the unconditional surrender signed in Reims, France, and this was on May 8, 1945, where it became implemented, this officially end of World War II in Europe. So we are Formula One wise in 1946. So you see, it is very short after this unfortunately very bloody war, which we had practically all over Europe and of course also on other continents. Why so short? Because people needed some entertainment, and for this they were happy about everything which had been offered to them. Motorsports had a quite high importance, maybe even more than today. If we speak about Formula One, as today we also have a lot of other options. So Formula One was very important, and we see later a little bit when we speak about the Italian Grand Prix, because when we discuss the numbers of spectators. As you may imagine, it started around 1 year after the end of the war, so no time for the manufacturers to develop new cars, and besides the time, there had been no budget, as first of all, the manufacturers had to build up again the possibilities to produce the normal street cars as they had been needed. But luckily, a lot of cars had been developed before World War II and not destroyed in the war. And these cars mostly had been used to reorganize the races again. So Formula One traces its roots to the World Manufacturers Championship, which we had from 1925 to 30, and the European Drivers' Championship, which we had from 1931 to 1939. This term formula refers to a set of regulations that all competitors' cars must meet. And now 1946, a new set of rules was agreed upon to create what became known as Formula One. Officially, this should take place in 1947, but we had one Grand Prix, the Italian Grand Prix, which have been already organized under Formula One regulations, this as a test run to see if this would work out, if we have the cars, if we have the people interested to see the event. Prior to World War II, various Grand Prix racing organizations had proposed a new championship to replace the European Championship, but the onset of the war delayed these plans. The international formula was only formalized in 1946, with the first championship beginning in 1915. So we had the formula, but for whatever reasons, maybe we see this in the next episode, it took still 4 years to have a championship based on these regulations. The 1946 Grand Prix season marked the first post-war year for Grand Prix motor racing and was notable for featuring the inaugural race run under Formula One regulations, the 1946 Turin Grand Prix. The three most prestigious races, they have been in France, Switzerland, and Italy, and these are the races where we want to focus on this in this and the next episode. Had been recognized at the Grand Prix, the Great Trails in English, by the FIA. So you may say these are the core races which developed later into this championship. Although there was no organized championship that year, Raymond Sommer emerged as the most successful driver this year. He secured 5 Grand Prix victories. One of them had been the Grand Prix, the one in France. And besides this, he won 4 other races, 5 in total, 4 outside the Grand Prix. So he was the most successful drivers. And Maserati, if we just count the number of victories, had been dominant, winning 9 of the 20 races. But if we concentrate on the Grand Prix, here we had a complete different picture, Alfa Romeo dominating. Nevertheless, Alfa Romeo drivers achieved 2 victories at the Grand Prix, while the other races had been won by Maserati. And here you may also consider Maserati had much more cars, so they participated at much more events, in opposite to Alfa Romeo, who may have been focusing on these 3 big races. So the races took place everywhere, not everywhere, but in different countries. We had the 3 big ones, and besides this, we had 1 race in Belgium, 2 in Brazil, 10 in France, 1 in Italy. Again, 1 in Italy besides the Grand Prix, 1 in Spain, and 2 in UK. And here you see a photo of Raymond Sommer, French driver, 40 years old at that time, and the most successful driver this year with 5 victories. What we will see later also is that the drivers had been much older than you would see them today, like 2024 in the Formula One. Many above 40, some even above the 50s. Of course, these have been routineers, already been race drivers before World War II. And one important point maybe also to consider is motorsports at this time, 1940s, 1950s, and even 60s, 70s, etc., have been much more dangerous than today. Why the drivers and also the spectators accepted that we had a number of drivers dying every year? Maybe this has something to do that people had saw dying based on non-natural causes, not based on illness, but on accidents. They saw this a little bit more normal, as everybody in Europe knew people who died in the war, died as soldiers or also as normal people because their cities has been bombed, shot by soldiers. So everybody knew friends and family being killed in the last years, so it was still perceived a little bit more normal than we see this luckily today. With this, we're coming to the three core races. First one on June 9 in Paris, of course, France. Here we have the victory of the local driver Raymond Sommer, driving for the Scuderia Milano using the Maserati 4CL. So, important point here, in opposite to Alfa Romeo, Maserati supported the private teams, a team like Scuderia Milano, while Alfa Romeo had their works team. And important to mention that both Alfa Romeo 158 retired due to gearbox problems. And this gave opportunity for the other teams to score a point. Louis Turin, I will come back to him a little bit later, is the Talbot Darracq on second position, and another Maserati with Robert Massin on the podium, here used by the Écurie Franco-Américaine. Switzerland, which had been, of course, in a good position, organizing an event as they not had been affected that much by World War II. So here we see already the dominance of Alfa Romeo using a works team in opposite to the others. And this maybe had been one of the advantages, besides that the Alfa Romeo 158 as car itself was very strong. Victory by Giuseppe Farina, second position Carlo Felice Rossi, and third French Jean-Pierre Vimille. All these drivers, I will come back to them in a moment. So this had been the first two races, and then the third race, the race which should be organized based on Formula One regulations. Here we are now in Italy, in the north, Torino. It was a temporary street circuit, as you may say, street, because it was inside the Valentino Park. As already discussed, the first Formula One ever. And due to this, also a test run, how this would work, having the cars, having the spectators. And luckily, everything worked out fine. The race was attended by 120 up to 200,000 people. We don't have the exact numbers, but you see also on the photo, which is taken from the race weekend, it was very well perceived. A lot of cars and a lot of spectators, a lot of cars. In numbers, we had 5 Alfa Romeo, 11 Maserati. So you may say the first years of Formula One have been practically a local competition between Alfa Romeo and Maserati, and then in the 50s also in the beginning joined by Ferrari. We had Lancia. So quite heavily an Italian-dominated event in the early years. We had one participant from France, Delay. This was the only car which not complied with the new F1 requirements, and 3 of the British ERAs. When you see the photo, and when I see this is an enhanced audio podcast, meaning Gunnar and I always try to share some interesting photos. You see the audio version on YouTube Music, and Spotify. So try to see this if you want to have the images. So on the right, you see first line 4 Alfa Romeo, the 5th Alfa Romeo in the second line, then a bunch of Maserati, and then at the end, the other participants. So really Alfa Romeo, the 158 had been dominating the 46 season when they participated. Not only from the start, but also the results. Number 1, again, Giuseppe Farina, Jean-Pierre Vimille, and then we have Carlo Felice Rossi, all of them with the Alfa Romeo 158, which we see here on the photo. So Again, quite short season when you compare it with today's Formula One year. And this gives us now already time to discuss the cars. Gunnar and I always recommend read the books if you're interested in the drivers, also if you're interested in the technology. But if you have the opportunity, try to visit the various car museums. And a big recommendation here is the Alfa Romeo Historic Museum in Milan, where you see street cars, prototypes, and they also have two of these 158 cars, which is not completely true. What you see here is the 158. The car in the background is an update which they used for the 51 season, and which they then renamed to 159. But what you see here is the 158, which they first built in the years 1938 to 1939. So in these 2 years, they built all the 158s, but continuously updated them, using them up to 1951. But really, they really have been built only in 2 years, in 38 and 39. First, for the Voiturette series, which is more or less comparable to Formula 2, and then updated them to Formula 1 specifications. A little bit background. The cars had been developed by Alfa Corse, the official racing division, after Enzo Ferrari left the company, because before this, the Scuderia Ferrari had been the official Alfa Romeo racing department, but there had been some personal discussions, and Enzo Ferrari decided to leave Alfa Romeo, and Alfa Romeo had to build up a new racing division, which have been Alfa Corse, and their first project had been the development of the 158, including a new engine, and the whole project was led by the legendary Gioacchino Colombo. If you saw our earlier episode about Bugatti in Formula One, you already have know this name, as he first was working for Scuderia Ferrari. He stayed at Alfa Romeo when Enzo left. Then later left Alfa also to join Ferrari. Then joined Maserati, joined Bugatti, and finished his career at AV Agusta Motorcycles. So the 158 debuted at the 1938 Coppa Chiano, and the last race was in Tripoli Grand Prix, the last race before World War II. To prevent the cars from being discovered by German troops, Alfa Romeo hid them under a fake wood pile on a pig farm near Milan. That's the way these cars survived World War II, to be reused then starting 1946 up to 1951. You see quite a technical development. First of all, in the first year they had 195 horsepower. This based on Formula 2 regulation, the Voiturette series. But then in 1950, for example, based on Formula 1 regulations, they produced 340 HP, 340 horsepower. So this is a little bit the background to the Alfetta, or the Alfa Romeo 158. Its main competitor had been the Maserati Force Ciel, also originally built from 1939. So before World War II, also originally built on the specification of the Voiturette Formula 2 series, before they had been changed to 1946 regulations, starting in 1946 up to 1950. Fast car, even though we may say it was not on the same level as the Alfetta. And maybe this based on the car, but also as Maserati had a different strategy, not having a works team as Alfa Romeo, but provided the cars, selling the cars as more as a business to the different racing team, which was a smaller, less experienced than a works team had been. So maybe this was also one of the reasons why it was not on the same level as the Alfetta. Besides the 4CL, we also saw some of the smaller teams still using the earlier Maserati 6CM, and this car was only used based on the Voiturette specifications. So even if they participated in a Formula One race, it was not as strong as the original Formula One cars. We see this up to the 1950s, where not all the participants, especially the private teams, had been using Formula One cars, but some participated based on Formula Two specifications. And this also not in all the races, but they participated in singular events, mostly in their home races. Besides the older cars, we have a car which was developed in 1946, Cis Italia D46 car, again from 1946, based on Fiat technology, but also only built under the Voiturette specifications, so not as strong, of course, as the Formula One cars, as from Alfa Romeo and Maserati. So far, the cars. Let's talk again about the drivers. We see a lot of famous names here. So the three Alfa Romeo drivers, Giuseppe Farina, of course, the famous Farina family, as we know from Pininfarina, the manufacturer's coach builder designer, which still exists as company today. Carlo Felice Trossi and Jean-Pierre Wimille. And they are very interesting, not only as drivers, but also as engineers, having own companies. And again, you see the ages much higher as you would see them today. I mean, for TVC still have drivers, as for example, Alonso, which is still very competitive, but most of the drivers today are much younger. As I said, Rossi, Wimille, not only interesting as drivers, but also they had been engineers, they had been owners of their own companies. On the left, you see the Trossi Monaco, a car that Trossi had been co-engineered, but honestly, it was only used once because it looks very interesting, very futuristic, but it was a technical development which led nowhere. So yes, it was trial and error. They tried it, looks great if you see it today, but it wasn't competitive. On the right, you see an early vision of a car with the idea to motorize the whole country, having a cheap model as the Volkswagen Beetle, which was restarted in Germany, or the Fiat 500, and earlier the Topolino we had in Italy, the Renault 4, for example, or the 5CV. And another of the visions which should have been a cheap model, cheap basic car for the masses had been the Wimille, also now from 1946. Unfortunately, it had not been the success as the cars I've mentioned earlier, but a great idea. So you see early drivers, not only the gentleman drivers, a lot of them also businessmen, engineers, and these are two examples. More drivers, Achille Varsi, Alfa Romeo, and then Luigi Villarossi for Maserati and Louis Chiron. Louis Chiron was not French, as you may think, but he came from Monaco, and he's famous because he was the first Monacan driver to win the Grand Prix of Monaco. This until Charles Leclerc just lately. And 1946, he was already 47 years as he participated with Talbot in the first of the three main events, and the last one he participated with Maserati. Also important to mention, we have Prince Bera of Siam, part of the royal family in Taiwan. 42 in this year. Then we, of course, we have the legend Tasio Nuvolari, and this year participating with Maserati. If you are interested in Nuvolari, we did in Data-Driven Formula one episode comparing him against Gilles Villeneuve. So it was like a double feature, highly recommended. In 46, he was already 54 years old. And also important to mention Rec Panel driving for Maserati, as also he later had his own team, and also he engineered or co-engineered his own race car. That's it in a nutshell. Again, 46, quite short season if you compare it to today's Formula One years with more than 20 races. The less important legacy because it was really the birth of Formula One racing. No championship yet, but the very first Formula One race ever, which we had in Turin, Italy. Luckily, it worked out good. It has been positively perceived by the manufacturers and also by the audience, who really had been craving for race events again after the long dark years of World War II. That's it, and I assume in future we will also discuss the other races in the 1940s, just to give you a little bit a historic background as we started originally our YouTube podcasts with the year 1950. That's all for today, folks. Just as a reminder, we are as a video on YouTube, YouTube Music, Spotify. If you just have opportunity to listen as you're driving or working or whatever, we are practically on all platforms. Besides this, we have a mixtape. In fact, we have various mixtapes on Spotify. This is the Data-Driven F1 mixtape. Here we have songs inspired by Formula One, inspired by particular drivers, including there's also one song related to Tasio Nuvolari, for example. If you are interested in Formula One, you may enjoy also this music. Then that's all for today. Hope to see you soon. Maybe the next episode is together with Ganna Pogrevna. Would be nice. So see you then. Bye bye.